Good afternoon and welcome to the show. I'm Luke McCormack. During today's show, we will discuss continuous diagnostic monitoring and mitigation with government and industry leaders. With me on the show today are Richard Grabowski, Acting CDM Program Manager at the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, Department of Homeland Security, Jeremy Hyland, Chief Information Security Officer and Privacy Officer at the Office of Comptroller and Currency, Department of Treasury, Gary Stevens, Executive Director of Information Security, Policy and Strategy, Department of Veterans Affairs, Matthew Marsden, Vice President, Technical Account Management, Public Sector at Tanium, John Fange, Chief Technology Officer at Federal Microfocus, and Bruce Hembry, Field Chief Technology Officer at Cortex, a division of Palo Alto Networks. Well, the CDM program has been around just about a decade, and quite frankly, Richard, you've been there for a lot of that, doing a lot of the heavy lifting internally there. We're going to start with you to give us sort of a top line state of the state regarding the program, and congratulations on the acting role there.
Thanks, Luke. Appreciate it. Yeah, I've been around since 2014 in the program. Started in the architecture, been working on that for a while, and I kind of stepped into acting. Yeah, in 2021, it's been a very busy year. Obviously, the SolarWinds event had a lot to do with that. We're doing exciting things in the scope of dashboard and data analytics. We're very excited about how that positions us over the next 12 to 15 months. So we're looking forward to working with our industry partners and our agencies to move that initiative forward as we try to collaborate in a partnership model with agencies on risk and an effective defense model.
Really key. You can collect, but if you're not rolling that up crisply and cleanly into some sort of an environment where you can make good decisions, rapid decisions, we've learned quickly how that can become quite a gap. So thank you for all the work that you're doing in that area. Jeremy, how about over at the Office of Comptroller and Currency? Why don't you, for the audience, tell everyone what the OCC does and then how you all are doing on the CDM program and how that's helping.
Yeah, no, thank you. So the OCC, we're an independent regulatory agency, part of the Treasury Department. Our mission is to oversee the nation's banking system. So very important mission, kind of a not always super high profile, but always around, over 100 years around, again, providing supervision for the banking system. So obviously to that end, we end up collecting a lot of sensitive information. So cybersecurity is extremely important for the agency. And we've actually had some great success with CDM, right? We were an early adopter. CDM's provided us really great capability to get cyber tools and expertise to implement those tools. Really foundational for what we have now at I've actually only been at the OCC for a year, but it was amazing to come into an organization that was very mature with regard to cyber operations. And a lot of that maturity is due to the great access they've had to tools and expertise through CDM over the years. So definitely a big proponent of the program. We've leveraged it again, if I think about all the different operational capabilities we have, the vast majority of them grew out of our use of CDM over the past years.
Yeah, no question that you put these metering devices on these environments and all of a sudden things light up like a Christmas tree. And it's like, wow, where did all that come from? And then you're busy sort of cleaning that up. Where are you all on that sort of journey of, I'm sure you're way past that at this point in regards to just the level of maturity with the CDM program into the Defend program, et cetera?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was going to save that for some of the lessons learned, right? But
that's okay.
Just cleaning your data, right? And it's one thing to deploy the tools. It's very much another to clean up your data in such a way that it's very actionable. And we're still on that journey. That's actually one of the things that we're working on now and plan to in the future. A lot of success over the last 2 years in particular. Once we had everything kind of set up, then it becomes that next step of making sure that the data that you're getting is correlated properly and tied to your asset management program, right? And then tied into the various different like non-cyber sides of the world, right? Like I think, again, we're just trying to break down those silos. We can be really good at cyber monitoring, but if I'm not providing that data over to like the operational team on the just more of the IT side with regard to configuration management, asset management, software inventory, right? All of the things that feed into having a clear picture of what's on your network at all times, then we're not taking full advantage of the program. So that's kind of where we are right now from a maturity model, trying to make sure
like, you're kind of halfway through that journey, right? You've collected the data. Now you're really looking at it, trying to find out the most efficient way to use it. And that's fantastic. So I really do appreciate that. Matt, how about at Tanium? You all have been there since probably just about the beginning, involved with a lot of these different aspects of the CDM program, along with all these other activities that are going on across departments and agencies and the private sector, by the way. Tell us about what's happening at Tanium.
Tanium supporting agencies today on all of the challenges that Richard and Jeremy both described. Data analytics, collection, smoothing the data, making sure that we can dashboard the data appropriately is certainly a big concern for the agencies that we support. Making sure that we break down the silos and allow for information sharing across different functional teams, making sure that asset information is clearly communicated to security teams, making sure that security teams can clearly communicate vulnerability and configuration compliance information back to the operations folks, just making sure that clear cross-functional communication is enabled, and ultimately working through the logical data models, making sure that the data that's sent up is deconflicted, completely smoothed out, and able to be used in the analytics that the dashboard team needs most.
Yeah, you really, again, seeing this level of maturity about, we're not just wrestling, earlier on in these conversations, it would all be about, getting the instrumentation in place, collecting the data. Now we're really focusing on processing the data, acting on the data, et cetera. John, how about at Microfocus? So where do you fit into this program? And give us a state of the state about what you're seeing.
So as one of the largest software providers to the federal government with products operational in more than 300 agencies, we have a very deep and broad and long experience across the CDM spectrum, even before there was a CDM program. And what we see is a wide variety of agencies' experience and capabilities. There's very sophisticated agencies who are spot on, but a lot of agencies are, if you will, kind of working hard and fast, but not quite there. And ultimately, we're excited about the prospect of agencies being able to tap into as a service capabilities, whether it's from DOJ, SOC as a service, or things that GSA orchestrates from a procurement standpoint, or even as we've seen recently in RFIs, major civilian agencies reaching out to MSSPs to ask, what can you do for us? It's exciting because we see the federal government has a lot of great answers, but increasingly we're happy that they're looking to private enterprise to deliver, if you will, a full suite solution set of capabilities to deliver, better, faster, cheaper.
Right, and take some of those issues off the table so they can really sort of work up the value chain there. And I'll certainly be asking Richard about the SOC as a service that DOJ's implementing. I think that's great, right? There's a sort of another example, internal example, but where you can just acquire this capability and bump your maturity up very significantly and very quickly. Bruce, how about at Palo Alto? You all are right smack in the middle of the ecosystem across the board. What are you seeing there in regards to the CDM program and how you all fit into that?
The evolution of CDM has been an important component for us. We want to make sure that we are providing the correct telemetry that you all need to be able to leverage that data that we're generating. We're providing the components that are the firewalling, the cloud components, the automation components. They're all the genetics, I guess, if you will, inside of CDM. We're trying to make sure that we are providing data that is actionable and that it makes sense in the context for where you're using it. If you don't have good telemetry, if you don't have good operational data about a specific user using a specific application in a specific way at a specific time of day from a specific location, each of those things all contributes to a good holistic picture of security inside of a network. And that's what we're trying to do, is make sure that that happens efficiently at scale.
Right. The ability to have this fine-grained instrumentation certainly critical, and as we talked before, and then being able to process it and make it actionable, also very critical. Matt, how about Titanium? I want to ask you about a specific program that you'd like to highlight that Titanium is in the middle of, that perhaps the customers are asking you about, that we can just raise awareness to the community here.
Yeah, right now, what's top of mind for everybody and where we've really dug in with agencies is on the Zero Trust Initiative, working on the mandates that have been published in the recent executive order, helping customers and agencies and organizations move toward a more mature Zero Trust implementation. That's really been an area of focus for us. We provide extensible and high fidelity data about the endpoint, but that's one component of a Zero Trust implementation. So helping to guide and work with customers on selecting the right tools, doing the right implementation, ensuring that it's a lasting and durable solution that's being put into place, and helping to line up funding in order to make all that happen. That's really what's been top of mind for us. And I think we've seen a lot of success with agencies making leaps forward over the last couple of months in that area.
It's such a perhaps daunting task, right? Zero Trust. We actually did a specific program on that, and sort of emphasizing the architecture in Zero Trust architecture, and that's a journey that has multiple components and pieces to it. Richard, let's talk about a specific program that you'd like to highlight. Zero Trust on board. I understand that OMB has put a draft out there now to sort of double tap on some of the definition, et cetera. Give us a specific example or specific setup that you'd like to discuss in regards to the CDM program.
So a couple things. I want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing and how it's kind of manifested into success stories. So we don't talk a lot about small micro agencies a lot, but we do actually have a pretty robust shared service platform that we operate on behalf of small micro agencies. Someone had mentioned the EO, right? One of the things in the EO is about critical software, I think section 4. The tooling that we provided some of these smaller micro agencies were put into play almost immediately to identify and classify software to help them with those kind of policy drivers that are in that section 4 of the EO. That's a clear example of tracing investments and tools for small micro agencies to actually get to some of the mandates and requirements of an EO. So that's a good success story for us in terms of what we've done. In terms of where we're going and what we're focusing on, a lot of it again is in the EO. Some of that's also traceable to the American Rescue Plan funding that we got over the past 6 months. So we're heavily focused on things like endpoint detection and response, filling that critical gap and advancing the protective profile on the endpoints. And then we've been actually doing a lot of policy work via the MOAs, right? So the MOAs for the program are actually explicitly mentioned in the EO. And we've been really getting all those signed with the agencies. So those are the major things that we've been at. And actually on the MOA thing, some good news there. We're extremely successful. We were able to get more MOAs signed in 3 months than we had done in the previous 3 years. So it kind of shows you, the power of the EO, of course, but also the trust and the cooperativeness between us and the agencies that we look to leverage going forward as we make additional investments in technologies.
No question. Don't underestimate that 10 years of trust that you all have built up. MOA, just for the audience, explain what that does once that's signed. And also curious, you said there's a lot of micro agencies out there. Roughly how many?
Depends on the day you ask, right? So,
but is there 10, 100, 1,000?
Yeah. So the MOAs, well, let me give a background there because it's just for the audience. So it's an agreement, a legal agreement that we make with agencies when they come to participate with the program. It kind of defines terms and rules, how the behaviors and the responsibilities on each party. The new MOA is important because previously we had some limitations on CISA side on what we could do relative to the program and the data. The new MOA is a little bit more expansive. They give us a little bit more abilities to be more proactive in risk identification. And to the agency's credits, they've been fully cooperative in signing those, sending them over, discussing how we're going to work together in this new future that we're in. To answer your question, we generally are talking about 23 CFO Act agencies and more or less about another 89 or so, 79 or so non-CFO Act. So those are more small and micro ones.
Mm-hmm. So you really do have your hands full there with a lot of different activity, and the EO has certainly put some juice on it. recent activities, a lot of juice on it. So I think the timing is very much perfect. Bruce, how about at Palo Alto? Can you give us an example of a specific program that you'd like to highlight for us?
You know, we had to walk the walk before we could talk the talk on Zero Trust.
There you go.
It was a journey of 3 years for us to become Zero Trust from top to bottom, side to side. And it's not easy. It's the kind of thing that takes time, dedication, and a lot of analysis. That was not trivial. Making sure that we are able to do it at scale was another challenge. We want to make sure that it becomes something that's tenable. Without that careful attention to detail, it simply is not something that's easily, I won't, even then it's not easy, but it's not simple to put it together. And Zero Trust internally at Palo Alto has meant that even for things like solar winds and other stuff, that we were able to detect it very quickly and make sure that it didn't become an issue. That is something that I think that would absolutely should be highlighted. It's we pulled it off and we made it work.
Not only walking the walk and talking the talk, but certainly I'm sure you'll have a lot of lessons learned there. We'll save that for another round of questions. Gary, how about at Veterans Affairs? Can you give us a sort of a state of the state progress that you all are making there? Massive agency, a lot of moving parts. I'm sure that's quite the challenge trying to roll something like this out.
Yeah, for CDM, we've been obviously involved in that program since inception, when Mark Nieninger at the time was the lead for it. And so we've been able to really see a massive evolution in how we've been able to incorporate the CDM technologies to provide better visibility, endpoint monitoring, visibility, detection, response, the whole litany of things that are within that realm of CDM. Using the various tools. I mean, we obviously have a in-depth partnership with Palo Alto, and the things that are happening on the Zingbox side with enhancing our understanding of the IOMT environment and the IoT, which is we just completed about 3 months ahead of schedule, so that we have visibility in total across all the VAMCs, the VA medical centers, for those medical devices, and are getting enhanced metrics in that realm. I'd say what we're really focused on from a CDM standpoint is looking at holistically how to CDM get incorporated into the larger ISCM program, right? So that all the pieces are married up and are in harmony, and that there's a enhanced integration across the board. Because if you don't do those critical steps, then collecting a lot of logs, collecting a lot of information, but nobody's using that information holistically, and then it hasn't been integrated as well. So you can get little pockets of response, but not an integrated response. And that's what, so there's a lot of effort to ensure that we are integrated, that we are integrating those logs within the Splunk tool and our SIM capability there, so that we have a unified and integrated response. So those have been some of the major pushes that we're doing on the CDM side right now. And as I mentioned a little bit with the Zingbox implementation, incorporating that information as well. Because, we have about 1.6 million endpoints, a lot to monitor and detect. So it's essential that we get in front of that scenario and have that unified response.
Yeah, really, it sounds like just a structure and a framework that you can snap all these things into.
Absolutely.
And get the most efficient use out of that is critical. Well, fantastic. Appreciate that. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We're talking about CDM. We were talking specifically about various projects and programs, and wanted to talk about a specific program. John, I'm going to ask you, tell us about a specific program you'd like to highlight there that Microfocus is right in the middle of.
Yeah, so we're in the middle of quite a few, but if I had to pick one, in civilian at least, it would be our work at U.S. Commerce and Census around enterprise ICAM. Many of the, if you will, legacy ICAM, identity access management and privileged access management capabilities that the federal agencies have had are now end of lifing. And we're very excited that we've been chosen by a number of these agencies to replace legacy products. It's exciting because we've got one of the more sophisticated capabilities products in that IAM area, and Commerce is a very interesting, large, and challenging agency, and we're proud to be a part of their solution.
Fantastic. And you want to tell us what that product is? That's okay to do that.
NetIQ is Microfocus IAM product, and it provides end-to-end coverage for all 7 of 7 executive order technology capabilities as it relates to identity access management.
Fantastic. It looks like it's a perfect match there. I'm glad to hear that. Jeremy, how about over at OCC? You want to give us an example of a specific program? I know there's lots of pieces and parts when you're putting this CDM capability together. And you sounds like you guys are well along on your journey. Give us an example of a specific program you'd like to highlight.
Yeah, no, it is hard to pick just one. There has been so much good stuff going on. I'd say that for me personally, it's something that I'm really excited about over the last year. Through CDM, we were able to get access to Red Seal. It's a network mapping capability. And then we were able to deploy that in on top of all the vulnerability data and all the data in our SIEM that we were already collecting through CDM. And now we can actually map out vulnerabilities from a likelihood and exploitation standpoint on our network. And we use that pretty regularly to do vulnerability assessment on new vulnerabilities. That's just an example of how you have, once you have all this data, you can now start overlaying different technical capabilities on top of it to get much more actionable information out of the overall system. So that's one example. We're also doing a lot with just account management, identity management, SIEM, just a ton of work with Splunk trying to operationalize that data. So just a lot going on there.
Yeah, and trying to stitch all that together, these powerful tools now that allow you to do so much with this data that's now being collected. It's certainly very promising. Gary, first of all, I always like to ask when we have the Veterans Affairs on here, tell the audience how large the Veterans Affairs is. I think that's really important. You talked about those centers, and then give us a specific program you'd like to highlight.
So as you're well aware, the VA is a massive healthcare provider within the United States, and serve over 20 million veterans, both from the health side, benefits side, and from the memorial services side. And we have in essence of about 1.6 million endpoints, as I mentioned earlier, as well as over 170 plus VA medical centers, and then you have the C-Box beyond that with community-based outpatient clinics. So it's just a massive presence, and then we have significant numbers of integrations with the universities and the national labs, and just a massive presence. One of the things I'd like to highlight specifically is one of the efforts that we're working right now that's basically Fisma Containerization. And what that really means is that we are, as you're well aware, all the systems that operate within the federal government have to be certified and authorized to operate within those realms, and risk have to be assessed against those particular boundaries that constitute those systems. So there's been a massive push within the department to really refine under this, what we're calling Fisma Containerization, to ensure that we have all the various devices that constitute that particular boundary containerized, so that as we send systems forward for authorization, that we have a full complement of all the components, the risk inherent within those components, so that we can ensure that the authorizing official is able to understand the risk associated with that particular system, and then accept it or basically understand it, if you will, as part of that acceptance process. And so, I'd like to kind of chime in on what Jeremy said as well. We've also got some of those tools that he mentioned with Red Seal and the like, as well as with Splunk. And so this has really complemented some of the larger efforts that we have underway as well. What we're referring to as Authorization 2.0, which is really looking holistically across the set of metrics that would be applicable for these particular systems, developing some algorithms to help us identify, categorize, and catalog it from a risk perspective, and then provide that full complement of that risk perspective to the authorizing official as well. So it helps enrich their perspective as far as what exactly they're accepting, that is a litany of various individual data points associated with POAMs, associated, vulnerability status, and the whole series of things that get rolled up into a comprehensive metric. So those are some of the massive things that are major things that we're working right now.
Very large scale and super impressive. Okay, we're going to roll over to priorities. Richard, and I'm going to start with you. I think about all the help you're getting, right? You're getting direction from the EO. You've got some new leadership there at CISA, undoubtedly getting some oversight injections, we'll call them, and certainly all the departments and agencies saying, hey, here's what we need. Give us your top priorities for this year on the CDM program.
So first and foremost, obviously, we have to get the new technologies that we've built up into that dashboard up and running. For the background on the audience here, we used to employ a different technology and tool for the dashboard platform, which is a kind of critical piece to the architecture. We traditionally have called it layer C and D of the stack. Recently, we've awarded and developed a new platform to replace it that's powered by the Elastic technology. We are currently tracking to have about 50 of those up and running by the end of the month. And a key priority is to get to operationalizing those at the rest of the agencies as well, getting that data. So that's a key priority for us. We're also starting to offer that particular product or that particular part of the stack as a service. So we call it Dashboard as a Service, and this is a way that we can offer that same tool or platform through CISA without requiring a lot of agency overhead for those that don't have the staff or the expertise to maintain them. So we're excited about that as well. The other thing that I mentioned EDR a little bit, but the other things that we're doing that are relative to the EO is that object level visibility, right? So with the new MOAs, we're able to get object level data for CISA operators. So that's a priority for us. So we're going to retool the architecture to support that new capability. And then finally, we're going to go after the mobile space. So traditionally, we have not addressed mobile devices as part of our HWAM capability. So a priority for us is start to include some of that mobile device telemetry into our data sets.
Well, it sounds like the deck is full, and it sounds very exciting. I'm glad to hear all that various activity. Matt, how about at Tanium? Give us the top couple of priorities that you all are working on. What's a demand signal coming in these days?
I think Richard and Gary have both highlighted the significant priorities for all the agencies that we support. Certainly wrapping the arms around asset management and finalizing all of the efforts that are in place just to do basic hardware and software asset inventory, getting that information to the dashboard and instrumented in a way that it can be evaluated and risk decisions can appropriately be made. But now agencies are really moving into the defend capabilities and working on understanding exactly what detection and response looks like for the enterprise. So understanding how to invest in and implement tooling for their security operations centers, making sure that they've got teams that are educated on things like proactive hunt missions and how to do enterprise level scalable response. Those are the things that our agency partners are working on today. So we're just working on enablement and tooling and making sure that we can put the right data in the right hands of the right person at the right time.
Right. I almost wanted to say, sort of going on the offense now, but offense in a way in regards to properly reacting to all this information that they're able to get and analyze and then do something very quickly about it. Jeremy, how about at OCC? Sounds like you got a lot of spinning parts over there. What are the top priorities for you this year?
Yeah, really, with regard to CDM, the two things really stand out. One, Dashboard as a Service. We're very excited about that. When I was asked about it, it took me about 1 second to reply, yes, we want to be a partner as soon as possible.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah, we were in there amongst one of the partner agencies to roll that out. As a small agency, anytime we can move to an as a service approach, that's basically our strategy. Those are take advantage of managed services provided to us by others. We do that in a lot of different areas in IT, and this was a great opportunity to take advantage of that managed dashboard capability. So we're excited about moving that direction. The other thing is, as we talked about previously, just operationalizing the data, right? So you've got all this data, hardware, software, the information. I want to be able to move that out to other teams that are actually doing the asset management, right? So not just keeping it inside of cyber, but sharing that data with the rest of the IT organization and using it to make decisions. So that's kind of where we're at for the next year.
Yeah, I love the idea that you all are jumping on the dashboard as a service, and no doubt you'll be a great customer for CISA, if you will, and giving them a lot of good feedback on the use of it and what's working and what isn't. So good on you. I'm glad to see you're going to be an early adopter of that. Bruce, how about at Palo Alto? Can you give us an example of or give us a highlight of the 2 or 3 priorities that Palo Alto is focused on this year?
This year is definitely focused on cloud stuff. It has been a remarkable delta from when COVID started. We were already the largest security company in the world, but our bandwidth internally has gone up 13-fold from COVID. People working from home, agencies being connected distally, all those things. It is a challenge to get that last mile done and get those workers that are at home getting their connectivity correct and getting it secured well, doing it gracefully. All those things are not easy to do. So when I saw that bandwidth 13-fold, I would have never thought we could do that. But yeah, Prisma Cloud, Prisma Access, our VMs, all those things are all contributory to our solution that helps us get that information that these things like Dashboard as a Service or others may need to instrument and then ultimately be effective in defense.
And, just be able to, again, stitch all that together and make it work comprehensively, certainly very important as all the sort of weight gets put on these capabilities in this new sort of work at home dynamic. Gary, how about at Veterans Affairs? Sounds like, once again, you all also have a lot of moving parts going on over there. Give us
Absolutely.
the top priorities for VA this year.
Yeah, it's going to sound a little bit of a broken record here, but I'm going to put this all in context. I would say that when we first started, everybody was in somewhat of a triage mode to understand their endpoints, to gain initial visibility, and to integrate this information through the SIM deployments and that sort of thing. So fast forward to where we are today. We're still in the process of operationalizing those capabilities, but we're at a significant level of maturity beyond where we were before, as it sounds like a majority of the individuals on the phone are as well. So that's really where we're at, right? Is that it's very surgical, where we've used GovCard type analysis to figure out where are our gaps and seams, and then be very surgical. And we need this capability and not this capability because we already have it. And then it can be part of an integrated whole. Then it's operationalizing workflows as well as information so that we can better utilize it and enhance leadership decision-making at all various tiers. And then, it's been really those types of things that I would say have been the predominant drivers on what we've been doing. And then, it kind of goes back to what I was saying with the Fisma containerization effort, really refining, enhancing visibility, enhancing our understanding of metrics, and enhancing the understanding of the metrics and visibility at the various tiers that need the requisite information. A system administrator needs this type of information. The leadership at the CIO levels needs this type of information. So it's really an effort, a massive push to really discern what is the appropriate information at each tier to support the decision-making that's required. But I would say, we've been lucky because, CISA, DHS have been fantastic partners to work with in helping us do this. The dashboard is the predominant, effort that's being worked right there to really figure out how we get that dashboard up and operational and ensure that it becomes that authoritative source for the various data, and ultimately possibly will supplant FISMA reporting in some instance, if as we move down that path. But we really have appreciated their time and effort and engagement.
And I love the nice plug on the FISMA reporting. And I think that's certainly an achievable goal, right? There's no question that once you get to that point where all that information is available, you can just extract it right out of there, which I'm sure all the agencies are looking forward to that. John, how about at Microfocus? Give us the priorities in regards to what you all are working on to address this ecosystem.
Force multiplying automation, all of our R&D by and large has gone into SOAR and user entity behavior analytics capabilities, extensions to our products. And when we talk with CISAs and CIOs in federal, as well as Fortune 100 type companies, they recognize that those are the most critical things because the talent shortage in cybersecurity, as well as the realities of responding to a threat, just demand greater, faster, more precise user entity behavior analytics and response automation. And an extension of that is continuous authentication, which is the next level of multi-factor authentication, which most agencies have now implemented. But that continuous authentication is critical, and we believe will be part of the next level of guidance from NIST, as well as other organizations like OMB and executive order type directives.
And no doubt a key part of the Zero Trust architecture. We're going to roll over to lessons learned. Jeremy, I'm going to start with you. You all are well along on your journey. No question, you've learned a lot there. And I always like this question. Oftentimes we don't get into it a whole bunch. But give us the lessons learned that you'd like to impart, some of that wisdom, if you will, some of that experience to the community about what you've discovered, what's working. What could you, if you could do a do-over, what would you do over?
Yeah, no, I think the first thing is really just leveraging the flexibility of the CDM program, right? There's a lot of options for access to tools and then also access to expertise. I think that's something that we've learned along the way, that it's okay to ask for help and to go out and get expertise to help you integrate. That's been key to our success. Again, as a smaller agency, being able to leverage outside expertise that's available on tap through that vehicle has been really, really helpful for us. The other thing I'd want to emphasize is, it's that age-old adage of garbage in, garbage out with regard to data, right? Like at the end of the day, data quality is so important for this whole effort, right? You don't want to be reporting up bad data. So just we've had to spend a lot of time over the last several years on data quality and just making sure that everything was mapped properly with regard to assets. And that's still a journey that we're on. We're still actively working on making sure that the data quality is where we want it to be, so that the reporting is reflective of reality. So we've actually been leveraging external expertise on that too, through the CDM contract vehicle, to get the right people in who can help us look at the tools, make sure the tools are configured properly, and then do the right correlation so that the data is where we want it to be. So yeah, data quality, data quality, data quality. That's what I'd emphasize.
Yeah, a real key catch there. You're collecting a lot of data. You want to make sure it's is of the quality that you need. You're going to be taking some serious action in regards to that data. So totally understand that. And interesting that you're able to pull those resources off the CDM contract. So that's a good catch there for all the other departments and agencies that may want to do the same thing. All right, we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We're talking about CDM. Specifically, we're talking about lessons learned. I'm going to throw it over to Bruce, you at Palo Alto. No doubt you all have seen a lot of lessons learned as you've been with us on this journey. Give us some of those highlights.
The lessons that we've learned have been all about humanity. It's about the fallibility of humans and the scalability of humans. In our SOC internally at Palo Alto, we've only got 9 people. And those 9 people, they all live in the same time zone and they only work 8 to 5.
Wait, that's 9 people in the SOC at Palo Alto?
That's exactly correct.
That's impressive.
People. And they are, like I said, all in the same time zone. And they only work 8 to 5. That's only possible with the efficient application of automation. Without it, we would have long since had some sort of major crisis. So that lesson learned was make sure that automation is a fundamental component of the security that you are building and the way that you respond to the things that you detect. Without it, you are going to suffer. Your people they're going to hate their lives. Nobody wants to deal with the low-level alerts or false positives, all that garbage that Jeremy was talking about earlier. That garbage is just no fun. And to become efficient, automation was key to defending ourselves.
No doubt, when you're looking at, trying to find a needle in a stack of needles, really important. There's not enough manpower in the world to do that. So totally get that and really do appreciate that, pointing that out. Gary, how about at Veterans Affairs? You all have been, you're deep into it at this point. Give us a couple of the lessons learned as you're rolling this stuff out in mass scale.
Yeah, I'd say that the lessons learned is that it really requires, it's a teaming effort. I think at inception of the CDM program, it was really all about what did the Office of Information Security need to do, and ops was a secondary consideration. But what we've done is, well, obviously we realize that that's not the case, that we need ops as part of our shoulder to shoulder implementation. And so what we've done is we've really made this a collaborative, shared programmatic office that looks holistically at what we need to do from a CDM perspective, and then does what needs to happen, right? I'd also say that CDM is not a separate and distinct activity that can be that can be pursued independent of the larger ISCM strategy. It really is a holistic strategy that needs to be pursued across the entire enterprise. CDM is one facet of that, but then there's many facets of your larger ISCM program that you also have to consider. And then I'd also say that it's all about the ability to operationalize the CDM program and then provide the visibility that I mentioned earlier to ensure that we have an understanding of our environment and then can make decisions based upon that understanding. And I would say that those really have been the lessons that we've learned over time. And again, if you look where we were and where we are today, we are far beyond, far more mature than we ever were 8 years ago.
No doubt, and imparting some great wisdom on the community. Really do appreciate that. John, how about at Microfocus, lessons learned?
There's many, but if I had to pick one, it would be enterprise DevSecOps processes and tools. What we find in larger agencies is that each major program is deciding how and when they do CI/CD and with what tools. And that introduces a lot of unknown risks from a higher level CIO standpoint. And ultimately, the best, if you will, implementation of this that we've been a part of proudly was at the Air Force, which has an amazing software factory. So what we've learned because of the SolarWinds and open source risks that federal agencies have now been exposed to and are aware of, that the enterprise level tools and processes are critical.
Yeah, no doubt. The good old Kessel Run, and perhaps Bruce was a part of that. Who knows? He might point that out. Richard, lessons learned. You, as I said at the beginning of the program, you've been involved in this program, not quite from the beginning or perhaps from the beginning, but in the middle of a lot of heavy lifting over there. As you reflect back, lessons learned that you'd like to communicate out there to the ecosystem.
Yeah, the guests here have so many of them that I might take a little bit while to put stump all of them. I'll start with the human element, right? Don't get overextended. I've learned this kind of firsthand. We get a sense from this partnership model that we're with agencies that there's always a emphasis to chase the next new thing, but we don't finish the things that we had started, right? Mm-hmm. So this kind of the chasing the next big thing can be problematic in some cases. So, I would say focus on completing manageable chunks of work and then moving on deliberately, as opposed to kind of spreading your finite resources, your human, your expertise too thin, is a huge lessons learned. I would also say in a good way to cut corners, right? Cut unnecessary corners. Jeremy had mentioned SaaS models, right? What we're finding is that in agencies that adopt SaaS services, the time to deployment, the time to operationalization is much more concise. It doesn't take as long to build out infrastructure, to buy things, to physically deliver things. You can get off and running a lot faster. So I'm a huge proponent of that for a lot of reasons. The other one that I want to mention also is enterprise approaches. When it comes to some of these agencies, especially the heavily federated ones, there's this kind of silos of autonomy sometimes that are tough to tackle. And so at some point, you almost are doing 10 times the amount of work trying to get governance in place, trying to make decisions, trying to find strategies and integrate. If you're trying to integrate, for example, 10 different identity tools, much larger effort than doing one that applies to the enterprise as a whole. So I would really kind of focus on that from an agency's perspective as well. Try to get some semblance of a found enterprise approach to your ISCM strategy. Not the least of which will help a lot of the issues we've talked about today, right? Data quality becomes easier. You're not integrating from 10 different data sources, it's not one. Skill sets and training becomes a lot more streamlined. It has a lot of benefits, and it's one of those things that we've noticed time and time again, that without that enterprise approach, things become complexities for both technical and non-technical reasons.
Yeah, no doubt that, optimizing and simplifying really sort of gains that efficiency. And you pointed out, acquiring it as a service. It's not only time to market, but it's just the manpower associated to that, right? Gets greatly reduced, and you can focus your attention on other things. So I really do appreciate those words of wisdom. Matt, how about at Tanium? Can you give us the top lesson learned as you all have been out there in the ecosystem helping implement this capability?
Top lessons learned is going to be difficult, but I'll take one that's certainly, I think, most broadly applicable. I think most of our customers and agencies that we work with on a daily basis recognized, like everybody else did, that when we went to a distributed workforce, many of the tooling and processes and procedures that we had in place just sort of fell over. There was a significant dependence on sort of niche tools that did a single thing. And when we moved the perimeter of the enterprise out to the endpoint, and we went over disadvantaged networks, and we had a heavy reliance on VPN connectivity, and we were working to gain access to applications that previously were only internal to the corporate network. When all of those changes happened, we saw a lot of those tools fall over. And so we went from a significant focus on tool reduction and reducing any overlap between tooling. And now there's an additional focus, sort of a resurgence on finding tools that can do more than one thing and have some overlap, so that if a single utility or a single function falls over, you have the capability in another tool so that you can fall back or recover in many ways. So I think that we over-rotated a little bit on reducing individual functionality to single tools. And I think that we're seeing agencies today circle back on that and recognizing the need to have functional tools that are capable in any type of distributed work environment.
Functional, robust, and a little bit of redundancy. It's a great catch there and a good point, lesson learned for all of us. All right, well, we're gonna focus on the future here. And I want to start with you, Bruce. And always like to wrap the show up and talk about paint a picture of the future, if you will. Tell us what it's going to look like in a couple of years as Palo Alto is pulling stuff out of the Petri dish, right? They've got it in early development. What's that demand signal that you all have been working on that we can expect to see over the course of the next 2 to 3 years?
Future is machine learning. It has capability that lets us do things without a human in the loop that is extraordinary. Humans just don't have the scope of awareness to pull all these things together and operationalize them well at scale and do it at low latency. That latency in disconnected solutions slows everything down, and frankly, it causes security challenges. We want to make sure that we are evolving to become more efficient. We want to reduce the mechanical entropy inside of us and subsequently inside of the agencies that use us. We're trying to make sure that we are providing a solution that is designed to keep it simple, much like Matthew was talking about earlier. We want to keep things simple. We want to make sure that it doesn't become complex, that it is evolving towards efficiency. And the graceful application of machine learning, the graceful application of automation, all of those things become components that contribute towards low detection times, low response times, and the efficiency of turning it into reality, making something actually happen. That is not easy to do. And so our focus over the next 3 years is going to be taking those things that we've built and refining them, making them simple, keeping them scalable at cloud scale, and letting the agencies that use us evolve along with us. I hope that makes sense.
Refinement, automation, a big part of keeping these networks safe and keeping our country safe. John, how about at Microfocus? You described a lot of different things you all are working on. What can we expect to see over the next 2 to 3 years?
We believe the realization that data is the key and the crown jewel for hackers will emphasize the protection of data beyond data in transit and at rest, but also ultimately data in use through data tokenization and pseudonymization. And that's the key. If the data is useless to hackers, then the cost of a breach for both the federal government, but also companies globally will diminish dramatically.
Yeah, I always would say that the bad guys are not trying to get into these environments to look around and see how cool they are. They're getting in there to get access to the data. Full stop. Matt, how about at Tanium? When we look around in a couple of years, no doubt that you all are going to have further developed and matured those environments into this sort of higher order activity that you're talking about. What can we expect to see at that point?
I think at the end of the day, it really all just comes down to being able to paint a realistic and valid risk picture for decision makers at every different level. So whether you're at the senior administrator level or you're an IT manager, everybody needs to understand what the risk picture is under their purview. So being able to verify and trust your data, being able to reveal and protect your sensitive data at rest, being able to ensure configuration compliance and patching at scale without any additional risk due to gaps, being able to enforce policy at scale and understand that all of the machines that you're responsible for are visible and managed appropriately. Just ultimately being able to paint that risk picture that makes sense to the people that are using the data. I think that's really what it all boils down to.
Yeah, so key is that multi-level ability to take action on various types of data and dashboards, et cetera. I'm looking forward to that. Gary, how about at Veterans Affairs? You talked about a lot of stuff as containerization. If I'm head of software development in 3 years, what's at VA? What's that going to look like for me as you've sort of rolled out this capability?
Yeah, well, I really appreciate what Matt just said. I mean, I think it is all about understanding the risks inherent within the systems to the finite level that needs to be understood at the particular tier that needs to understand it. I'd say the predominant focus for the department, just like many other departments, is encapsulating the vision that is outlined within the executive order 14028, which is really implementing that ZTA, the multi-factor, the cloud, and ensuring that you have this holistic capability to understand risk, get that visibility that you need, ensure that cybersecurity has that seat at the table so that it's part of that decision-making process, and the relevant leadership at the right levels are making those particular critical decisions they need to make. And that's all based on understanding your endpoints, integrating the data, protecting that data, ensuring that it has integrity, the whole common set of things that we normally just take for granted, but it really has to be part of this integrated effort that looks holistically and comprehensively at what we need to fundamentally achieve. And I think the EO is driving us towards that. Luckily, at the department, we've got the secretaries directly engaged in cybersecurity, as well as all the various tiers. And that has helped us immensely in ensuring that cybersecurity has that driving force behind it so that we can do what we need to do from that perspective.
No question, there's a level of awareness at the senior levels of the federal service, and that was done in a variety of means, including some OMB memorandums. When you talk about zero trust architecture, I'll put you on the spot here, and I know it's a journey. How long do you think it takes to realize that fully, or do you ever realize that at Veterans Affairs? I know Palo Alto gave a timeline. We've heard of other companies. Is this a 3-year journey, a 5-year journey, a 10-year journey, a never-ending journey?
Well, Luke, I'd say this is that I don't know that I'm prepared to provide a particular time frame for when we believe we'll be full up ZTA. What we are doing is a thorough review of our full capability. We're looking at the NSA maturity model, the CISA model as well, figuring out where we are within that particular spectrum, and then developing our comprehensive plan to get there. So I wouldn't say 3 years, 5 years, but what I would say is that we have a lot of capability that is already inherent within what they would refer to as a ZTA architecture. Mm-hmm. So it's really looking at those components that we have, figuring out where those deltas are, and then figuring out what makes the most sense for us to deploy. Because I think there was a comment earlier that says, everybody wants to chase a tool. Well, sometimes it's not about chasing a tool. Sometimes it's simply about addressing the human element, ensuring that there's integration, that there's that visibility that you need. And so it's really a comprehensive approach holistically to address that ZTA perspective. But I would say we will get there. I just can't give you, a time frame that says, yep, in 5 years we'll be there. But I would say with what we have put in place, we're moving in that direction.
And that's awesome. And a lot of this is about taking the tools you have and stitching them together in that architecture that you're describing there. I think that's going to be a big aha moment for a lot of folks. Jeremy, how about at OCC? What's it going to look like in a couple of years?
Yeah, the agree with so many of the comments that have been put out there by the rest of the group. Automation is really key for us. Again, as a small agency, the number of threats that we're dealing with, the number of requirements, they grow much faster than we can ever hire to answer that solution, right? Like we have to think about how we do more with the resources that we already have, and automation is a huge part of that. So we're looking across the board at all of our processes. How can we automate them? Where can we gain efficiencies? And then also thinking about upskilling our workforce, right? Making sure that our workforce has the right training on scripting languages and the different tool platforms, and being willing to invest in the workforce to bring them up and give them the right skills to ensure they know how to use the automation.
Yeah, and I really applaud you highlighting the reaching out and leveraging these as a service capabilities. There's just, you can't hire enough women and men to work your way out of this issue. You have to automate, et cetera. So appreciate that. Richard, if I'm sitting in a planning meeting at CISA, and we're talking about sort of the next evolution, 3.0 of CDM, what does that look like? What are you expecting to do? What do you have in the hopper over the next 2 and 3 years that you want to take down, assuming all these other things you're doing go swimmingly well? And no question they have been in the past. There's no reason to think they won't. What's over the horizon?
So there's a term that Bruce used that I kind of want to use here, and that was latency, right? But not latency necessarily in technologies and tools, but latencies in people and processes across our enterprise, the federal enterprise, right? We have to figure out a way to mount a singular defense and not 100+ different lines of defense, right? We got to get faster. We have to be able to collaborate more effectively. We need to be able to mount a collective defense model, right? Because when we're fragmented, both in technology, tools, and processes, it takes us way too long to organize a pernicious threat that doesn't care about agency borders, right? They don't care of popping one agency. They're looking to hit as many places as possible. And so we have to have a cohesive strategy to deal with that type of an attack. And right now, we're not at a point where we can say, yes, I can coordinate amongst 102 different CISOs or different agency leaderships and mount a cohesive response, right? And so, to your point, Luke, I think over the next several years, and I think the EO sets us up well for this, we have to figure out a way to operate at people at the speed at which we're being attacked, and that's a huge thing for CISA. So that's first in my mind. To use a hopefully euphemism that's too not far removed from the Olympics. Like, this has to be a relay race and not 100-meter sprints, right? These have to be things where CISA can look at things. I'd help identify risks proactively, hand them off to agencies so they can go deal with the threat in a much more expeditious manner than we've ever done in the past. Hopefully the SolarWinds is kind of a wake-up call to something like that. And so it's the people and processes. Everything the other guests have said was also true, right? We have to have the right tools. They have to be trained up. They have to be operationalized. They have to be stable. But also, let's not forget about the people and processes as well.
Yeah, and you talked about a relay race. I go back to OPM and that breach, right? We learned a lot from that across the interagency, instilled a lot of capability. Then SolarWinds, more so now the executive order. So you keep handing that baton across and keep raising the level of maturity on that coordination, that sort of one government coordination effort. Super important. Well, I really do appreciate all that you all do on behalf of protecting this country. And I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us on the program. I'd also like to thank the sponsors for supporting us on this show. I'd like to thank the good people here at Federal News Network that make our program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, I'd like to thank you, the listening audience out there that tune in every month. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network.